Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. I ripped the front door open and almost shut it again. Emily stood there in hospital socks and a paper wristband. Her eyes were swollen but somehow still too wide. She grabbed the doorframe like the house might move. For a second, I honestly thought I was hallucinating her. My name is Lauren, I'm 32, and I was Lily's stepmother. 2 hours earlier, her heart stopped beating in a hospital room. Now her mother was on my porch shaking like the ground. That jump from fluorescent hallway to my welcome mat broke me. I knew if I slammed that door, I would remember it forever. She tried to talk, but her jaw just trembled instead. There was a dried smear on her forearm, almost brown now. Her fingers twitched near the wristband like she wanted it off. The nurse had called me after I left the hospital. She said Emily refused discharge because she had nowhere safe. "Can I just for tonight?" Emily's voice cracked straight through me. She looked past me into the hallway like she already lived there. She hugged Lily's hoodie to her chest like a shield. I stepped back and opened the door wider without thinking. It felt less like kindness and more like stepping off something high. She walked in slowly, like the floor might collapse if she rushed. I shut the door and the click sounded way too final. For a moment, we just stood there behind the thick quiet. Her shoulders started to shake and she covered her face. I had never seen an adult cry that hard in my life. "Where do you want to sit?" came out of my mouth. I hated how normal it sounded, like a regular visit. She sank onto the couch, clutching the hoodie like a child. I stayed standing, hands useless at my sides, heart hammering stupidly. If I touched her, I was afraid I would break too. You know that feeling when guilt buzzes under your skin? Like your whole body wants to confess even without words. That was me watching her on my couch in Lily's hoodie. The same hoodie I had folded this morning for school. I could not stop seeing Lily's empty seat in my car. At the hospital, the doctor spoke in a flat, steady tone. They used that voice when the worst already happened off stage. I remember asking him to check again because she was 13. Emily wasn't there. Emily didn't know. Emily still had hope somewhere. I walked out before they covered Lily's face, and I hate that. The nurse caught me in the hallway with restless hands. She said they had called Emily from the emergency contact sheet. She said Emily started screaming, then went silent and glassy. They kept her overnight because she kept whispering she had nothing. No partner, no family clothes, no place that did not echo. I drove home in a fog and never called my husband. That part still makes me look worse than I want. He was out of town, work trip, unreachable, all the excuses. Really, I just could not say the words out loud yet. If I said them to him, it would become real forever. So when the nurse called again and asked about Emily, I froze. She asked if Emily could stay with anyone she trusted tonight. I heard myself say yes while my chest tightened like a fist. Next thing I knew, Emily had my address and a rideshare. I told myself it was temporary, like grief could follow a schedule. Back on the couch, Emily rubbed her eyes with shaking knuckles. "Thank you for letting me come," she whispered toward the floor. I told her it was no problem and wanted to vomit. There is no normal phrase for letting your husband's ex move in. Especially right after their child dies on your watch. "Mark knows I'm here?" she asked, not really a question. The way she said his name made something twist in my stomach. I nodded because technically he knew she existed on Earth. My phone sat face down on the table between us. I had not called him yet, and every second made it worse. I picked up the phone, screen lighting my fingers like proof. One missed call from an unknown hospital number, nothing from Mark. My thumb hovered over his contact until my hand cramped. If I told him now, he would hear her breathing behind me. He would know I made this decision alone and on purpose. I needed to be where she was happy, Emily said suddenly. She looked around at the family photos I suddenly despised. She loved it here. She always sounded brighter after weekends here. Every word landed like a stamp of approval I didn't deserve. If she knew everything about that drive home, she would hate me. "Do you want to see her room?" slipped out before I thought. Her head snapped toward me like I had offered oxygen. For one insane second, I wanted to snatch the words back. Lily's room was still exactly how she left it that morning. Same unmade bed, same school bag dropped, same shoes by the door. We walked down the hallway in a slow, awful line. I could hear both our footsteps and my heart racing. Emily's hand brushed the wall, steadying herself like the house helped. At Lily's door I paused because crows. Seeing that threshold felt criminal. Once she saw inside, nothing would ever go back to before. I pushed the door open and the air shifted around us. Emily stepped in and just stopped in the middle of everything. Her fingers touched the edge of the bed, light and shaky. She picked up the pillow and pressed her face into it. The sound that came out of her did not sound human. I stayed by the doorway like some useless guard. Part of me wanted to drag her back out immediately. Another part thought this was the least I owed her now. She wandered from the bed to the desk, touching little clusters. Nothing fancy, just pieces of a life we had both lost. I should have been there, Emily choked out into the pillow. My throat tightened so fast I almost coughed just to breathe. I should have fought harder for more time with her. I wanted to tell her I didn't deserve the time either. Instead, I stared at a crooked photo and counted my heartbeats. That is something I still do when panic hits. Pick an object, any object, and count until my thoughts slow. Back then, it was Lily's smiling face frozen in that frame. I counted up to 20 and nothing got calmer or clearer. If anything, the guilt got heavier, like each number added weight. When Emily finally lowered the pillow, her face was streaked. She wiped it on her sleeve without caring how she looked. I can't sleep in some motel tonight, she said almost angrily. I will lose my mind in a room alone with that. She did not have to explain what that meant, I already knew. We'll figure something out, I answered, voice weirdly steady for once. I heard how it sounded like I had a plan. Truth was, I had absolutely no idea where she would sleep. Couch, guest room, Lily's bed, none of it felt remotely right. Every option cut into someone, and I was the one holding the knife. Back in the living room, she dropped onto the couch sideways. She curled toward the cushions like she wanted to disappear into them. I brought her a glass of water and set it nearby. Her hand reached for mine instead and held on tight. I did not pull away, even though my whole body wanted distance. Did she suffer, she asked, eyes locked on my face now. That question hit harder than any accusation could have tonight. I thought about the sirens and Lily whispering that her chest hurt. I thought about promising her it would be fine because I had to. I told Emily the doctor said it was fast and gentle, which was half true. That was the first lie of the night, not the last. Little edit to reality to keep us both standing upright. Maybe you would have done the same in my place. Or maybe you would have ripped everything open immediately. I still don't know which version would have saved more pieces. Outside, a car door slammed and my heart lurched into my throat. For a second, I thought the hospital had sent someone else. Then I recognized the sound of our driveway gravel under tires. Mark's ride had dropped him a day early, perfect timing. Of course, the universe picked this exact moment to throw him in. Emily went still, listening, fingers tightening around the hoodie again. Is that him? She whispered like we were kids caught stealing. I nodded and suddenly felt like I was 12 and grounded. The keys rattled at the front door and my stomach flipped. There was no script for this scene, and I was the one who cast it. The door opened and Mark stepped in, dragging his suitcase. He stopped the second he saw Emily on our couch. His eyes moved from her face to the hoodie to me. The air between the three of us turned sharp and crowded. For a moment no one spoke, and that silence burned more than words. What is going on? His voice was low, but it shook. He dropped the suitcase and it toppled sideways with a dull thud. Emily's shoulders hunched like she took a physical hit. I stepped in front of her before I even thought it through. My hands were trembling again, but this time I didn't hide them. She needed somewhere to stay tonight, I said, each word heavy. Just tonight, she can't go back to that place alone. Emily stared at her shoes, jaw clenched, breathing jagged and rough. Mark looked from me to her like he was doing math. I could see the exact moment he realized I decided without him. You invited her here after, he stopped before saying Lily's name. The unfinished word hung between us like a dropped rope. His eyes were bloodshot from travel and something darker. Lauren, this is our house, this is our space. That last part landed like a door trying to slam shut again. Emily finally spoke, voice small but clear in the room. If this is too much, I can go somewhere else. She stood halfway, still clutching the hoodie, eyes on the floor. The idea of her walking out into the night hit me hard. I pictured her alone in some anonymous room whispering Lily's name. "You are not going anywhere tonight," I blurted before Mark answered. He stared at me like D picked a stranger over him. Maybe I had, at least for this one brutal evening. "I'll sleep on the couch, she can take the spare room." The plan formed mid-sentence, and I locked myself into it. Mark rubbed his face and turned away for a second. I could see his shoulders rise and fall like he was counting. When he looked back, his jaw was tight enough to crack. One night, he said finally, voice flat as hospital walls. "After that, we talk about what the hell we are doing." Emily sank back down, eyes spilling again, hoodie pressed to her mouth. Mark walked past us into the kitchen without another glance. The sound of the fridge door opening felt weirdly loud. I stood there between them, stuck, holding up a decision I barely understood. Later, I would realize that letting her in was the easy part. I woke up to drawers banging in the hallway like small earthquakes. For a second, I thought Mark slammed something in the kitchen. Then I heard hangers scraping together, sharp and rhythmic and wrong. That sound belonged to someone settling in, not someone visiting. My chest tightened before my feet even hit the floor. I stepped into the hall, and Lily's door stood halfway open. Emily stood with her back to me, shoulders hunched, suitcase open. She was moving folded clothes into Lily's dresser like it was obvious. Her hands shook, but the motions were weirdly careful and slow. Every shirt she placed there felt like another line she crossed. "Morning," my voice came out thin and scratchy like it belonged elsewhere. She turned fast, eyes red, hair pulled back in a rough knot. "I didn't want to wake you, I just needed somewhere for this." Her gaze jumped between the drawers and my face like she expected permission. One wrong word and this whole fragile arrangement would explode. I told her it was fine while my brain yelled the opposite. Mark had said one night, not a full relocation into Lily's space. But the sight of that suitcase on the floor twisted my stomach. Packing her things back up felt like pushing her into the street. So I smiled too wide and said we had room for everything. She picked up Lily's hoodie from the chair and hugged it again. "I couldn't keep this in a bag," she whispered into the fabric. "I need to see it when I open my eyes." I watched her lay it at the top of the drawer like something sacred. Part of me wanted to grab it back and hide it. "Come grab coffee when you're ready." That was the best I could manage without snapping. She nodded and turned to the desk, fingertips tracing old notebooks. I backed out of the room before I blurted something cruel. There is a version of me that ends everything right there. In the kitchen, Mark stared at his phone like it was accusing him. He didn't look up when I walked in, just pressed his lips together. His travel bag sat by the table, still zipped and untouched. He had not even changed out of yesterday's clothes, which said plenty. The entire room felt like a meeting I didn't schedule. "She's putting her stuff in Lily's room," I said, no warm-up. He flinched like I had thrown something at him. Already, his fingers tapped the phone, then stilled on the screen. It was supposed to be one night, Lauren, one. The way he hit that word made my neck heat. "Where exactly do you want her to go right now?" I pulled a mug from the cabinet with more force than needed. "In case you forgot, she just lost the same person we did." He braced his hands on the table, shoulders tight and rigid. I could feel the argument pulling us in different directions already. "I didn't forget anything," he dragged in a slow, uneven breath. "I just don't think Lily's room should turn into this." He waved a hand toward the hallway, as if that explained everything. I knew what he meant without him finishing the thought. A shrine, a crash pad, a battlefield, all of it lived there now. Before I could answer, his phone lit up with an unknown number. He stared at it for a heartbeat too long, then answered. "Yes, this is her father." His voice dropped into that formal register. I watched his jaw clench as he listened to whoever was talking. "Funeral home," my brain filled in, because what else would it be? He put the call on speaker and set the phone on the table. A calm professional voice walked through schedules and arrangements. They needed us to come in, pick a time, choose the basics. Nothing dramatic in the tone, just logistics for the worst week imaginable. I kept waiting for someone on that line to realize we were kids. "We can be there in an hour," Mark answered after a pause. He looked at me, but not really at me, more through me. "I'll bring her stepmother and her mom." The word mom caught. He swallowed hard, like that title cut his throat on the way out. The person on the phone just confirmed the appointment and disconnected. We should let her know, I said, fingers tightening around my mug. Mark nodded, eyes fly. Seeking briefly toward the hallway again. You tell her I can't look at that room yet. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the back door without another word. The door shut behind him with a dull, solid thump that lingered. So that left me as grief coordinator for the morning. I walked back down the hall, each step heavier than the last. Lily's door could have been a courtroom entrance at that point. I knocked lightly and pushed it open before I lost my nerve. Emily sat on the bed, hands locked together, staring at nothing. They want us at the funeral home soon. My throat tightened halfway through the sentence, but I pushed it out. They need us to make choices, for the service and everything. Her eyes blinked slowly like the words had to travel underwater. Then she nodded once, sharp and small, like a decision hurt. I don't know how to pick anything for her anymore. She rubbed her thumb over the edge of her hospital bracelet again. I picked wrong on everything else apparently. Her laugh came out flat and shocked both of us. I felt that line hit me between the ribs and stay there. You didn't do anything wrong yesterday. The sentence left my mouth before I weighed it. It was pure instinct, like slapping a hand on a wound. Her gaze lifted to mine, heavy and searching and tired. She looked like she wanted proof, not comfort, which I didn't have. We drove to the funeral home in Mark's car, not mine. That choice was not an accident, and you know it already. He insisted and I let him, because climbing behind my own wheel terrified me. Emily sat in the backseat, clutching her bag like turbulence could hit. No one turned on the radio, so every breath felt too loud. Inside, the director walked us through forms and time slots. He laid out options like a menu, gentle but relentless and steady. Which day, which room, music or no music? I kept my voice level while my stomach lurched with every answer. It felt like planning a birthday while hiding a body under the table. I want something with singing, Emily cut in at one point. Her hands gripped the armrest, knuckles pale and rigid. She loved when the kids sang at school concerts. Mark's jaw tightened again and he shook his head. I don't want some big production, I just want it simple. They looked at each other across the desk like strangers in a dispute. The director glanced at me, polite but expectant, waiting for a tiebreaker. I hated that the decision somehow slid into my lap again. We can have one song, not a choir, I offered carefully. It felt like splitting a baby in half, but I smiled anyway. We're paying for this, Mark muttered without lifting his eyes. Emily flinched like he'd slapped the air between them. I'll help, she shot back, even though we all knew better. Her voice shook, but the words came out fast and sharp. I suddenly wanted to grab them both by the shoulders and yell. I'll cover whatever she can't, I cut in, louder than intended. Both their heads snapped toward me like I'd fired a gun. If she wants one song, we can handle one song. Silence spread across that little office as they weighed that. Money had just joined grief at the table, and it would stay. On the drive home, Emily leaned her head against the window. Her reflection stared back at her, hollow but focused. Mark kept his eyes locked on the road and the speedometer. I watched his right hand flex on the wheel every few seconds. No one mentioned that I usually sat in that driver's seat. At home, we landed in the kitchen like separate storms. Mark dropped the folder from the funeral home on the table. Emily reached for it immediately and flipped to the program page. She traced the blank lines where the songs would go, lips moving. I stood near the counter, suddenly feeling like the guest in my own house. I want to write something for her, Emily said after a while. A few words, nothing long, her thumb tapped the paper. I can't just stand there and say nothing. Mark exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled, eyes on the floor. He didn't argue, which almost surprised me more than if he had. Then you should, I managed, even though my lungs felt tight. You can share whatever you need to share. I knew what that meant for me though, standing up there beside her. Whatever she said about custody, time, mistakes, it would soak the room. Everyone would look at me and decide who deserved which piece. Mark's phone buzzed against the table, breaking the standoff. He glanced at the screen and his whole face changed. It's my mom, he muttered, then stepped toward the living room. I caught Emily's eye as he walked away, and hers were wary. She knew that voice on the other end would have opinions. We could hear muffled words, but not the content, just tone. Sharp here, pleading there, long drawn-out pauses like negotiation. Emily stared at the doorway, jaw tense, hands rubbing together. I rinsed a mug I hadn't even used just to keep moving. Doing nothing felt worse than any wrong move at that point. When he came back, he didn't sit, he just leaned against the counter. She's coming in a couple days, he announced, short and clipped. She wants to help with arrangements, with everything. Emily's shoulders dropped slightly, then lifted again like she braced. I suddenly saw the future arguments lined up like dominoes. Is she staying here too? Emily asked, voice low but steady. Just that question lit my nerves like someone flipped a switch. Mark rubbed his forehead, buying himself a few seconds of silence. No, she'll stay at a hotel near the church. That answer calmed exactly no one, and we all knew why. Emily pushed back from the table and went to the sink. She stood there a full minute, hands braced on the edge. When she turned, her eyes fixed on the car keys near my elbow. I had tossed them there automatically when we came back earlier. Her stare pinned them in place like evidence on a board. Can I ask you something about yesterday? Her question sliced through every other thought in the room. Mark stiffened beside me but didn't move or interrupt. I could hear the clock on the microwave ticking like a countdown. My fingers closed around the keys without realizing I was doing it. When you were driving her, did she say anything scared? Emily's voice was almost a whisper, but every word landed heavy. Did she ask for me? Did she cry? I swallowed hard and looked anywhere but directly at her face. The memory of Lily's shaky breathing burned the back of my throat. She asked if we would still go to the game, I said slowly. She thought it was just chest pain from stress or something. I left out the part where I told her we'd laugh about it later. I couldn't repeat that line out loud without falling apart completely. Even now, remembering it feels like grinding bone against bone. Emily covered her mouth, eyes glistening again, shoulders trembling. She wasn't scared then, she murmured through her fingers. At least not the way I pictured all night. Mark watched me silently, studying my face like it held a clue. I knew he heard what I didn't say as clearly as what I did. Are you sleeping at all? Emily asked after a long pause. The question came out gentler than I deserved. I nodded fast, too fast, the lie almost tripping over itself. Yeah, a little, enough to function. My voice sounded thin. If she could see the red in my eyes, she knew the truth. Her attention dropped to my hand, still wrapped around the keys. She stared at the metal like it might speak if she waited. Her fingers flexed like she wanted to pick them up and examine them. That was the first moment I felt something colder than grief from her. Nothing spoken, just suspicion stretching between us like a tight rope. Mark cleared his throat, breaking whatever thread had formed. I'm going to shower, he muttered, heading toward the hallway. He stopped near the doorway and looked back at both of us. Maybe after that we can go through her things together. He meant Lily's belongings, though no one wanted to say the word. After he left, the kitchen felt smaller, like the walls crept closer. Emily sat again, elbows on the table, fingers pressed to her forehead. You know, I always thought I'd be the one they blame, she whispered. For the divorce, for court stuff, for everything that went wrong. She let out a shaky breath and looked straight at me. Now I think they might look at you instead. The sentence was almost soft, but it knocked the air out of me. I don't want that for you, I really don't. Her voice cracked on that last word, and she closed her eyes. Hearing her say it felt worse than if she had screamed accusations. I could have defended myself right there with every technicality. Told her about the truck, the light, the speed, the chaos. I could have laid out each detail like a shield against blame. Instead, I just stood there, keys digging into my palm, and stayed quiet. Because the thing about near truths is they break under too much weight. Looking back now, that quiet meant more than any speech. It planted something inside her that would grow over the next days. She didn't fully trust me after that moment, not with the story. And honestly, I didn't fully trust myself with it either yet. You can judge that all you want, sitting safe on your couch. I spotted the red stamp before I saw her name. A stack of mail lay on the counter, half opened, half tilted. One envelope faced up with big block letters screaming final notice. Under that, in smaller print, was Emily's full address from somewhere else. My hand landed on it before my brain weighed any boundaries. For a second, I just traced the edge with my thumb. The paper felt thin, like it would tear if I breathed wrong. I told myself I was only moving it, not snooping. Then my finger slid under the flap and I dead myself. That tiny rip sounded like a fire alarm in my head. Before I could unfold it, footsteps approached from the hallway. I dropped the envelope like it burned and grabbed another bill. Emily walked in wearing Lily's old t-shirt knotted at the waist. Her eyes went straight to the torn edge near my hand. Her mouth tightened and the air dropped 10 degrees. "You can read it." Her voice was quiet but not gentle, more tired than angry. She pulled out a chair and sat without looking away from me. "If it's on your counter, it might as well be public." That line landed harder than any confrontation would have. I slid the paper free while avoiding her face. It was short, 3 lines, very polite, absolutely brutal. She had 3 days to clear her apartment, or the landlord would. Unpaid balance listed at the bottom like a punchline. My stomach lurched so hard I had to grip the table. "How long have you known about this?" My mouth moved faster than my filter, which happens a lot. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling like she counted something. "Long enough that they stopped calling and just send warnings now." Her laugh came out thin, like it broke halfway through. In that moment I saw it straight. This wasn't just grief lodging in our house for a week. She literally had nowhere else that didn't have a lock changing soon. If I pushed her out, she would be dragging suitcases and boxes. Probably straight into a cheap room with walls that echoed worse. "Why didn't you tell us?" I heard the judgment in my own voice and hated it. Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp and wet at the same time. "Tell you what exactly? That I can't even keep a lease." She rubbed her forehead like the words gave her a headache. "I picked up extra shifts when Lily got sick last month." Her hands moved as she talked, restless and jittery. "I missed rent, then another one, then it snowballed." She shrugged, small and defensive, like the story embarrassed her. It felt like one more thing I failed her on. I could have said a lot right then. That medical bills drown people all the time. That this wasn't a personal moral failure stamped on her forehead. Instead, I stared at the unpaid amount and thought about our account. About how easy it would be to write one check and condone everything. "Mark doesn't know," she added, softer, almost apologetic. "He thinks I'm staying here because it helps you too also." That hit me harder than the number at the bottom. I realized I had let Mark believe it was temporary, 1 week maybe. While Emily quietly slid her entire life into our hallway. The back door opened and Mark stepped in, keys jangling once. He took in the scene, envelope, faces, tense shoulders. "What's going on?" His eyes moved between us like a tennis match. I folded the notice before his curiosity caught the heading. Emily turned away, wiping under one eye with her wrist. "Just more mail from the hospital," I lied too quick. He frowned at the folder clutter near the sink, suspicious but tired. "Great, more paperwork." He pulled out his phone and checked messages. "Detective left a voicemail too. Report is ready for pickup." That last sentence made my fingers go numb around the paper. The word report brought the crash back like a slap. Not the image of metal and glass, but the questions afterward. Speed, signal, weather, distraction, all those tidy little boxes. Mark scrolled silently, then tossed his phone on the counter. "I'm meeting him tomorrow to grab everything before the service." Emily's posture stiffened at the mention of detective. "Why do we need a report?" she asked, voice steady but sharp. "They already told us it was the truck driver's fault." Mark shrugged one shoulder, jaw clenched, gaze on the floor. "My mom wants details, insurance wants details, everyone wants something." At the mention of his mother, Emily's mouth flattened. "Of course she does." She stood and reached for her mug. Mark didn't respond, which somehow made it worse. He grabbed his keys again and headed for the hallway. "I have calls to make for tomorrow, you two handle lunch." After he left, the kitchen went heavy and still. Emily stared at the spot where his phone had landed. "He really listens to her," she said, not exactly accusing. It was just an observation, but it dug under my skin. Because she was right, and because I used that same line privately. "His mom only sees this from one angle," I answered. I stacked the mail into a neater pile, hands busy. "To her, you and I are both intruders in different ways." Emily gave a tired half smile that never reached her eyes. At least you got a wedding, I got a custody schedule. I wanted to tell her that didn't make my spot safer. But that would sound like competition for pain, which I refused. I slipped the eviction letter under the pile where Mark wouldn't see. Not my finest hour, I know, hiding the truth like that. I just couldn't handle one more argument about who belonged where. The next day blurred around the funeral service. I am not going to walk you through the whole thing. You can picture the chairs and the shared tissues on your own. What matters is how people looked at us, not the flowers. 3 adults in one row, one space on the end forever empty. Emily spoke first, voice shaking but words clear and organized. She talked about Lily's stubborn streak and sarcastic humor. She mentioned weekends with us in a careful, almost generous way. She had more than one home, she told everyone, glancing at me. The room hummed with whispers I pretended not to notice. When it was over, Mark's mother cornered me near the exit. She touched my arm like she owned the gesture. You are holding up amazingly, she started, tone sugary and sharp. Considering everything that happened under your watch yesterday. My heart rattled so hard I thought it might shake my necklace. I did everything I could, I answered, voice thin but steady. She tilted her head like she didn't fully buy it. If that detective report says otherwise, you need to tell us first. Her eyes slid toward Emily across the room, who stood alone. This family has enough chaos, we do not need secrets now. That line would have sounded reasonable from anyone else. From her, it felt like a warning nailed to my forehead. I watched her drift toward Mark, hand on his back, whispering. Emily caught my eye for half a second, questioning. I forced a reassuring look I did not feel at all. Later that afternoon, Mark dropped a thick manila folder on our counter. I picked it up, he announced, as if that wasn't obvious. He didn't open it right away, which terrified me more. Instead, he grabbed a beer and stood there, staring at it. Like the paper might explode if he touched it wrong. Do you want to go through it together? I asked. My voice came out lower than usual, almost hoarse. He shrugged, then shook his head, then shrugged again. I don't know, part of me wants to burn it. His fingers drifted toward the edge, then curled into a fist. It's just facts, I offered, though I didn't believe that. Facts can gut you worse than opinions when they land right. I already told them what happened, you know my statement. That was technically true, and also not the whole story. I left out certain pieces when words sat under official letterhead. Maybe I'll look later, he decided, pushing the folder aside. After my mom leaves tomorrow, I can't do both at once. He went upstairs to shower, footsteps slower than usual. Emily was still at the cemetery with 2 of Lily's friends. That left me alone with the file and my own heartbeat. I made myself a promise standing there. I would not touch it, I would not read one line. Whatever was inside could live with Mark first. I stacked some plates, ran the dishwasher, wiped the counter. Every time I turned, that folder sat there like a fourth person. By evening, exhaustion crushed me and I crashed on the couch. When I woke up, the house was silent in that heavy way. Mark was still upstairs, door shut, light seeping under the crack. Emily's shoes were by the door, which meant she was back. The folder was no longer in its original spot. A fresh layer of panic slid over the older layers. I checked near the microwave, then by the fridge. Finally, I saw it closer to the edge of the table. It looked slightly off-center, as if handled and replaced. My throat went dry even before I heard footsteps behind me. Emily walked in wearing the same dark clothes from the service. Her face looked calmer, but her eyes were wired and sharp. She poured water, drank half in one go, then set the glass down. Her gaze landed directly on the folder between us. Is that the traffic report? Her tone was too neutral, which scared me more. Yeah, Mark picked it up earlier but hasn't read it yet. I tried to sound casual and failed completely. She slid into a chair like she had been waiting for this moment. Do you think it says anything different from what they told us? I hesitated just a beat too long. That tiny pause gave her all the answer she needed. Without breaking eye contact, she reached forward and flipped it open. My hand twitched, but I didn't stop her, which is important. If I had closed it, we'd be telling a different story right now. She scanned the first page fast, lips moving on certain lines. Her finger traced down to the section with timelines and conditions. I watched her pupils tighten as she landed on a paragraph. Here, she murmured, brows pulling together. This part is about you. I felt like the floor shifted under my feet. No, that's about the other driver, I started, grasping. She read aloud, voice steady, each word like a nail. Driver of vehicle 2 appears to have been using a mobile device. Possible distraction confirmed by phone records near time of collision. She lifted her eyes, and the page to my face slowly. There was no hysteria there, just something hard and focused. Phone records near time of collision. She repeated the phrase like she wanted to hear it twice. Whose records are those exactly? My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I tried to swallow and nothing moved. She turned another sheet and pointed at the printed name. Not the truck driver, mine. Seeing it in black ink made my skin crawl. So they have your phone activity down to the minute. Her voice didn't rise, which somehow hurt more. Call log, messages, everything you tapped while you drove my kid. She tapped the paper with one fingernail, sharp little clicks. Who were you talking to right then? I opened my mouth, closed it, then opened it again. She watched every twitch in my face like a lie detector. I could hear the shower running upstairs, water pounding. Mark had no idea this conversation was happening under his feet, and that whatever I said next would shift something permanently. I slammed the report closed and her palm pinned it down. Paper crinkled under both our hands, hard and loud. Don't you dare, Emily whispered, eyes burning straight through me. Who were you texting when my kid was in your car? The water upstairs hammered against tile like an approaching storm. It was a work thing, I got out, pulse roaring in my ears. Total coward move, I know, but it came out first. She stared at me like she could peel the sentence apart. Work, she repeated, lip curling just a little. So some email mattered more than watching the road. I pulled my hand back, fingers stiff, palms damp and clammy. It's not like that, I checked it at the light. Even as I spoke, I heard how weak that sounded. Her head tilted, slow and deliberate, like she found something interesting. So it turned green and you were still looking down. My jaw locked, I could not get a word out. She flipped the report open again, this time faster, more focused. Right here, text message sent at 4:12 p.m. Her fingertip tapped the line, sharp little beats on the page. Estimated impact 4:12 and 17 seconds. That ring any bells? The number 17 made my whole body go cold. I had counted those seconds in the hospital without realizing why. They stretched forever in my head, even though they were nothing. Who was on the other end? She pressed, voice lower now. Because whoever it was gets to share this with you. It was Mark. The words dropped out before my caution could block them. Her eyes narrowed slow, like she suddenly adjusted a lens. He was texting you about what exactly while you drove her? My throat felt raw, but there was nowhere left to hide. He wanted to know if we were still making the game. The memory rolled out whether I wanted it or not. He asked if we were on time, if traffic was bad. I clenched my hands together to keep them from shaking. I answered at the red light and then we moved. You ever replay one moment so many times it blurs? Not the whole day, just that tight little slice of it. I remember the light in front of me, solid and bright. I remember glancing down, thumb hovering over the send button. I remember that tiny urge to tweak the message and sound calmer. The light flipped to green while my eyes were still on the phone. My foot came off the brake out of pure habit. We started rolling forward, slow, almost lazy, not full speed. Then a horn blasted from somewhere behind and jolted me. My head snapped up and the truck was already there. I saw the side of it, too close, too fast. I slammed my foot down and yanked the wheel without thinking. The impact hit Lily's side first, hard enough to jar my teeth. She gasped once, a sharp shock sound, and the world tilted. By the time everything stopped moving, my screen still glowed in my lap. Back in the kitchen, Emily watched my face as I relived it. Her expression changed while I talked, tighter, more controlled, almost frozen. So you were answering him when the light changed. Her voice stayed low, but every syllable carried weight. You rolled into an intersection with my child while texting my ex. I opened my mouth, searching for some way to soften that. There was a drunk driver blowing the red from the side, I pushed. Even if I had stared straight ahead, he still would have hit. The words came fast, tripping over each other, desperate. That's what they told us, that's what the report says. She jabbed the page again. The report also says distraction, you keep skipping that part. Her chair scraped backward as she stood, legs unsteady but determined. So maybe he still hits you, maybe not as hard. She pointed toward the hallway like the crash sat there right now. Maybe he clips the front instead and my kid walks away. Her voice broke on that last word, then found itself again. Maybe you slam the brake because your eyes are where they belong. She dragged in a shuddering breath and looked at the ceiling. I would give anything for that maybe, you get that. The bathroom door upstairs opened and pipes groaned to a stop. Footsteps crossed the bedroom, steady, unaware of the war downstairs. Emily heard them too, eyes flicking upward, jaw tightening. Are you going to tell him the truth before I do? She folded her arms like she was done asking nicely. If you tell him, he will blame himself for the text. The sentence tumbled out fast, my last pathetic shield. You know how he is, he will carry that forever. She laughed once, short and harsh, no humor in it. Goods, then he can help you hold it up. The stairs creaked and Mark appeared in the doorway, hair damp. He took in the open report, our faces, the tense air. What now? He asked, voice flat, already bracing for impact. Emily turned toward him, shoulders squared, eyes bright with anger. Ask your wife who you were texting right before your daughter died. His head snapped to me so fast I heard his neck crack. What is she talking about? My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out the fridge hum. We already went through this, I know you called 911. His gaze dropped to the report, reading lines he had avoided. He skimmed the paragraph, lips moving, then stopped, completely still. When he looked up again, his eyes were different, sharper, colder. You were on your phone with me, he said slowly. Not shouting, not yet, which made it worse somehow. Not just after, not just to tell me, but during. I answered one text at a light, I insisted, voice cracking. I wasn't scrolling while flying down the highway, I'm not insane. It sounded weak even to me, like a teenager excuse. He took a step closer, towel in his hand, fingers tightening. How long have you been hiding that from me? I backed into the counter, hip bumping the cabinet. I didn't hide it, I just didn't highlight it when everything blurred. I hated how careful that sounded, like legal language in my own kitchen. Emily snorted, turning away like she couldn't stand the phrasing. She left it out of her statement too, the officer noted that. Mark's head whipped toward her. You read the report before I did. She held his stare without an ounce of regret. Somebody had to care what actually happened. Her voice rose on happened, sharp enough to cut through the room. I care, he shot back, eyes flashing, towel hitting the table. I just buried my child today, forgive me for pacing myself. His hands shook as he pressed them to the edge of the counter. I trusted that my wife told me everything that mattered. That last word landed like a dropped weight between us. I felt something inside me give way. My brain was scrambled, I didn't even remember the text at first. I knew how flimsy that sounded, but it was the truth. It came back later and I couldn't bring it up. Because once spoken, it would stop being a detail and become a verdict. So she remembered later, Emily threw in, voice tight and trembling. She remembered and sat on it while we planned the whole funeral. She pointed at the fridge where Lily's picture still hung crooked. She let me sleep in this house, eat your food, cry in that room. Without telling me my daughter died while someone answered a text about timing. My legs went weak and I grabbed the chair to steady myself. It was not about pizza or something stupid, I argued, desperate. It was about the game, about getting there, about her being excited. As soon as the words left, I heard how bad that sounded. Like I had traded seconds of safety for punctuality and a smile. Mark dragged both hands down his face and exhaled hard. So she was hyped for the game and trusted you completely. He looked at the report again, then at my phone near the sink. And you trusted a red light more than your own instincts. It wasn't shouted, but it knocked the air from my lungs. I also trusted the driver who blew the light, I snapped. Anger flared sharp and hot, riding on top of the shame. The investigating officer said he was the primary cause, not me. Emily barked out a laugh that sounded almost hysterical. Congratulations, you only share the blame for a dead teenager. I slammed my hand on the table, rattling the glass nearby. Do you think I don't replay it every minute I breathe? Do you think I don't hear the horn in my sleep? My eyes burned, but I forced myself not to look away from her. If I could take that text back, I would carve it out of time. Silence stretched, thick and vibrating, none of us moving. Mark paced once, twice, then stopped in the doorway to the hall. He stared down the corridor toward Lily's room and Emily's bags. "This is the part where we decide what to do next," he muttered. Not to either of us directly, more to the floor. Emily followed his gaze, then shook her head slowly. "I can't stay here anymore." Her voice was oddly calm, almost flat, like she had crossed a line. I thought I could handle it because this place holds her laughter. She turned back to me, expression tight and unreadable. Now all I see is the woman who let that truck reach her side. No yelling now, just a sentence delivered like a verdict. "It's not just the crash, it's the half-truth since." She grabbed the report and thumped it against her palm once. "You opened your door to me, but you kept the worst part locked." Mark leaned on the doorframe, shoulders sagging, eyes hollow. "Where would you even go?" he asked, voice rough, not meeting her eyes. "You told us about the apartment, about the notice, about the bills." Emily gave a short, bitter smile at that. "So you did share some things when it suited the narrative." "You can stay," I blurted, panic spiking at the thought of her leaving. The hypocrisy of that hit me even as I said it. "I know I've handled things badly, but you still don't have anywhere safe." Even to my ears, safe sounded wrong attached to this house. Emily's face twisted like the word tasted sour. "This place is not safe for me anymore," she answered quietly. "Every corner has you in it, every hallway has that car ride." She tucked the report back into the folder with shaking hands. "I can't keep waking up under a roof where my daughter's last minutes are paperwork." Her gaze flicked between us, waiting for someone to argue. Mark pushed off the frame and moved toward her, then stopped midway. His hand half lifted like he might reach for her shoulder. He dropped it before touching her, eyes darting once toward me. "I don't want you on the street," he said, voice rough. "But I also can't fix this by forcing you to stay." "So that's it?" I asked, throat tight, words scraping on the way out. "We blow up the only place she felt like she had both parents." It came out raw, harsher than I meant, but I didn't take it back. Emily looked at the floor, then at the hallway again. "That place went away the second you chose your screen over her window." That line punched straight through every excuse I had lined up. I felt my knees wobble and grabbed the counter behind me. Mark flinched like she had swung at him too. He pressed his palms into his temples and squeezed his eyes shut. For a moment, none of us seemed to know where to stand. "I'll pack tonight," Emily said finally, voice steadying itself again. "I still have a friend across town who owes me a favor." She straightened her shoulders like she was lifting something heavy. "You won't have to watch me haunt Lily's bed anymore." Her mouth trembled on Lily's name, but she held the rest firm. Mark looked like he wanted to argue and couldn't find a foothold. "You don't have to decide this right now," he tried anyway. "We're all wrecked, no one is thinking clearly tonight." Emily shook her head, already moving toward the hall. "This is the clearest I've felt since the hospital, actually." She brushed past me, close enough that her shoulder nearly hit mine. I caught a whiff of the cheap hotel soap from the hospital shower. It made my stomach twist for some reason I still can't explain. Her hand grazed the family photo hanging near the hallway corner. She straightened the frame, then let it tilt again, like she changed her mind. Mark stayed frozen in the kitchen, staring at nothing. I wanted him to run after her or pull me aside or something. Instead, he just whispered, "What have we done?" under his breath. He didn't say we as in all three of us either. I heard the edge there, and it sliced on the way through. Down the hall, drawers opened and closed, soft and quick. Zippers rasped, tape tore, hangers knocked against each other. Each sound marked another piece of her leaving this house. I stayed where I was, rooted to the tile, unable to move. Because whatever step I took next would be toward someone and away from someone else. I caught the box just before it slipped from her arms. Emily had stacked too much, clothes and folders and one framed photo on top. "Careful," I muttered, voice rough from crying and arguing all night. She adjusted her grip without thanking me, jaw tight, eyes focused. We were past politeness, standing in my entry like opponents. Mark hovered behind us, holding her suitcase by the handle. He kept shifting his weight, like his body wanted to walk away. "Rideshare's 2 minutes out," he said, staring at the floor. His thumb tapped the side of the suitcase in a jumpy rhythm. Every movement in that hallway felt like someone packing dynamite. We set the box near the door so she could grab shoes. She pulled them on fast, like if she slowed down she'd crumble. Her fingers fumbled with the laces once, then tightened them hard. I leaned back against the wall, feeling completely drained and wired. There was no version of this goodbye that wouldn't leave bruises. "You don't have to rue." I tried even though I knew she did. She snorted softly, not amused at all. "If I don't go now, I'll lose my nerve and stay angry here instead." She reached for the hoodie hanging on the hook, Lily's hoodie. My hand twitched then dropped because I had forfeited any claim to it. She slipped it on and zipped it up to her chin. For a moment she looked much younger, almost like the girl who wore it. "Do you want anything from her room besides your things?" I asked. The question came out careful, like I was stepping over broken glass. Her eyes flashed toward the hallway, then back to my face. "No," she answered, breathing uneven now. "That space belongs to her, not to you, not to me anymore." She lifted her chin, forcing herself not to look away. "You keep it however you need to live with yourself." That last part landed harder than if she'd slapped me. The car pulled up outside and the engine idled. Mark opened the door but didn't step through yet. "Your friend knows you're coming tonight?" he asked, voice low. "Yeah, couch for a while, then we'll see," Emily answered, pulling her strap up. "She's used to chaos, she won't ask many questions." We carried the box and suitcase down the path in silence. The driver popped the trunk, eyes politely blank, not wanting details. Emily slid the suitcase in and hugged the box to her chest. "That one rides up front with me," she told him, voice sharp. I knew the photo inside was Lily's, and I knew why. She turned to Mark first, arms still around the box. For a second I thought she might hug him, but she didn't. "Call me if there are updates about the case," she said. "Not your mom, not your sister, you." His throat moved as he swallowed, but no words came out. Then she looked at me, and my ribs felt too tight. "You let me fall apart in the one place she loved," she started. Her gaze flicked up to the house, then back down. "I will never forget that you made room for that." She paused, and the silence wrapped around the next sentence. "And I will never forget that she died in your care while you looked at a screen," she finished. No yelling, no dramatic gesture, just that clean cut. "If I sound ungrateful, that's fine. Grief is not polite." She nodded once, almost like a bow that hurt her neck. Then she got in the car, without waiting to hear anything from me. The trunk shut, the car eased out of the driveway, and she was gone. I watched the taillights until they disappeared around the corner. My body finally remembered how to breathe, but it hurt. Beside me, Mark wrapped his arms around himself like he was cold. The empty spot where the car had been felt louder than any scream. "She won't be okay out there," I said, voice unsteady. It came out more like a confession than a prediction. If something happens to her now, after all this. I couldn't finish that thought, my throat closed on it. Mark kept staring at the street like he expected the car to reverse. "I need to get out too," he said, finally breaking his stare. My head snapped toward him so fast it made me dizzy. "Out where?" I asked, though I already knew. "This house feels like a crime scene and a shrine at the same time." He rubbed the back of his neck, fingers digging in hard. "I'm going to the motel near the highway for a while," he continued. "Couple days, maybe longer, I can't think straight in here." He wouldn't look at the living room windows or the hallway. Every corner has something of hers and something of this fight. He grabbed his keys from the little dish by the door and pocketed them. "You think I can think straight here?" I shot back, stung. "I hear the crash every time the fridge turns on." My voice wobbled, so I cleared my throat and tried again. "I'm the one who brought her mother in so she wouldn't lose everything." It sounded defensive even to me, but I couldn't stop. He finally met my eyes, and I almost wished he hadn't. "I know why you opened the door to her," he said slowly. "You thought it would balance the ledger a little." He shook his head once, sharp, like he was shaking off rain. "Some things don't balance, no matter how many good deeds you stack." He walked past me toward the stairs to grab his bag. I watched his back, waiting for him to turn around again. You ever stand there hoping someone will stop and hug you anyway, even though you've just given them every reason not to? That was me, rooted to the floor, listening to his footsteps overhead. He came down with a duffel slung over one shoulder, much lighter than Emily's packing. He paused by the photo wall, fingertips hovering near one frame. Then he dropped his hand and stepped away like the glass was hot. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said without looking at me. "I'm not sure it matters yet. I'm still figuring out what we even are." "Are you coming back?" I asked because I needed the word. "To the house, to us, to anything." He shrugged a tire. The uneven motion that scared me. "I'm not making promises from inside this level of shock. I'll call, that's all I can offer without lying." The door closed behind him and the lock clicked automatically. That little sound made my knees weaken more than everything before. I stood there for a long minute, staring at the space he'd occupied. The house felt both huge and cramped, like the walls leaned in. I suddenly realized every single person in that family had left through that door. That night I tried to sleep in our bed and lasted 10 minutes. His pillow still held a faint trace of his shampoo and sweat. I lay there on my back counting my breaths until my chest hurt. Eventually I grabbed a blanket and went to the couch downstairs. The cushions sagged under me, shaped by days of other people's grief. I woke before sunrise to my phone buzzing on the table. For one wild second, I thought it was the hospital again. Just spam, just some random alert, nothing important at all. I checked my messages anyway, out of habit and punishment. One unread text from Mark sat at the bottom of the screen. "I'm checked in, need space, don't drive late, M." I read it 3 times, searching for anything softer. No heart emoji, no pet name, no little joke on the end. Just instructions like I was a teenager in trouble. I typed and erased 3 different replies before giving up. I spent the next day cleaning like an obsession. Not deep cleaning, just moving things from one place to another. I carried Emily's forgotten coffee mug to the sink and stopped. Her lipstick print still faintly marked the rim, half worn off. I almost scrubbed it, then set it back on the counter untouched. The mailbox held another letter, addressed to her that afternoon. This time I didn't open it, I didn't trust myself. I took a picture of the front and stared at my screen. Then I blocked my own thumb from hitting send to her. I didn't know if reaching out would help or rip more open. 2 days later, Mark came by to pick up more clothes. He knocked lightly instead of using his key, which told me everything. I opened the door and stepped aside, suddenly shy with my own husband. He walked straight to the bedroom without brushing against me. His distance in that hallway stung worse than any shouted insult. "How's the motel?" I asked from the doorway, trying for normal. He zipped his bag, shoulders stiff, focus on the bedspread. "Quiet, cable that barely works, ice machine outside my door." He gave a short, humorless laugh, then let it die. "It's a good place to think and not break dishes." "Are you talking to Emily?" I asked, careful not to sound accusing. He paused, then nodded once. "Short messages, logistics. She sent me a copy of her therapy intake form." He rubbed his eyes, exhausted in a way sleep wouldn't fix. "She's trying to get her head above water so she doesn't drown in this." I swallowed hard because that image hit home. "What about us?" I pushed softer, heart pounding against my ribs. "Are we trying? Are we waiting? Are we pretending until it fades?" He looked up finally, and his gaze was tired and sharp. "You are trying to decide if you're a monster or a martyr online," he said. The floor seemed to tilt under me for a second. "How do you know that?" I whispered, heat rushing to my face. He lifted his phone, opened to a screen I recognized. "I saw the draft on your laptop when I came by earlier. A post asking strangers if you destroyed your family by helping her grieve." I had forgotten I left that window open at all. Written half the story, stopped when the guilt made my hands shake. "I wasn't going to post it," I lied, then winced at myself. He raised an eyebrow, not buying it. "You want a ruling because ours isn't clear enough," he said. "Maybe I want someone to tell me there was no right move," I shot back. That any choice that night would wreck something important. I could feel my voice going hoarse from holding back tears. If I had locked her out, you'd never forgive that either. And I wasn't strong enough to watch her wander off alone after losing everything. He leaned against the doorframe, duffel at his feet, studying me. "I don't hate that you opened the door," he said quietly. "I hate that you kept the worst part to yourself while you played host." He exhaled long and shaky, like it cost effort. I don't know how to build anything on top of that right now. So what do we do? I asked, standing in my own bedroom like a stranger. He picked up the bag and adjusted the strap. You stay here, apparently writing court briefs to the internet, he answered. I keep sleeping next to the ice machine until my nervous system calms down. Then we see if there's anything left between us that isn't just wreckage. He walked past me toward the door, then stopped by the photo wall again. This time he did touch one frame, Lily's last school picture. His thumb brushed the edge onk. A tiny broken gesture. I still see her in the passenger seat when I close my eyes, he murmured. He didn't specify which car, which driver, which day. After he left, the house settled into a heavy kind of quiet. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open to the draft. The cursor blinked at the end of the sentence about the porch. All I had to do was hit submit and let strangers weigh in. Judge the woman who let her husband's ex fall apart on her couch. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I finally did something I hadn't done since the crash. I picked up my phone, scrolled past the text thread with Mark, and opened a new one. I typed Emily's name and a short, uneven message. Are you safe tonight? That's all I want to know. I hovered over send for a full minute, breathing hard. In the end I sent it, then turned the phone face down. No buzzing came right away, no instant relief or instant punishment. Just the fridge cycling on again and the house holding its breath. Me alone at the table, wondering if kindness and damage can wear the same face.